I was sitting at my glass desk, the early morning sunlight glinting off the silver watch on my wrist, when my phone buzzed insistently. The vibration on the polished wood felt almost like a warning. I glanced at the screen. My mother's name, lighting up in bright, intrusive letters. My stomach sank in a way it hadn't in years. I had spent so long building this life, creating a space where my daughter and I were safe, independent, untouchable, and now, here she was, stepping back into my carefully arranged world. I smoothed my silk blouse nervously, a nervous tick I hadn't given myself the luxury of indulging in years ago, and I tried to steady my breath. From the corner of my office, I could see the city waking up below. Taxis honking, joggers weaving along the streets, the hum of life moving relentlessly forward. But in that moment, I felt the past pressing on me, heavy and unrelenting. When I finally answered, her voice was syrupy, practiced, the same tone that had once dismissed me while my daughter's life hung in the balance. "Sarah," she said, almost teasing, "we need to talk." And just like that, all the carefully maintained calm of my world teetered. I gripped the phone a little too tightly, noticing the prickle of tension in my shoulders. My thoughts raced, anger, disbelief, pride, sorrow, all tangled together. How had they spent $250,000 on a wedding and yet refused to do what was necessary when it truly mattered? And now, somehow, I had become their only hope. I exhaled slowly, letting the cold glass of the desk press reassuringly into my palms, and I whispered to myself, "Not this time. Not ever again." I remember the way the kitchen smelled that night, burnt toast, faint perfume from my mother, and something sour in the air, like tension you could taste. I was 28, exhausted and desperate. My daughter, Lily, was sick, sicker than I had ever imagined a child could be, and I had begged, pleaded, even cried for my parents to help. Not a dime went to her treatment. Instead, they talked about centerpieces, floral arrangements, and the photographer's perfect shot for some extravagant wedding they were throwing for my cousin. Their words blurred together as I sank to the floor, clutching Lily's tiny hand, her fevered skin hot beneath my palm. "Sarah," my mother said finally, voice clipped, rehearsed, "you'll manage." "We can't," but I had stopped listening to the polite excuses. I had stopped expecting compassion from them long ago. That night, as I held my daughter, I realized it was up to me, and me alone. The lump in my throat made it hard to breathe, my hands shook, and tears blurred the candlelight in the room. I felt both rage and heartbreak, a mix that made me feel larger than life and smaller than air at the same time. It was then my grandmother's voice echoed in my memory, "You have the strength to move mountains, Sarah. Never forget that." She had pressed a delicate gold locket into my hands years earlier, saying it held the courage of all the women in our family. I clutched that locket now, turning it over in my fingers as if it could somehow transfer its power to me. That night, I made a decision. I would stop waiting for them to do the right thing. I would figure it out myself. No amount of wealth, no polished speeches, no social expectations would ever replace the responsibility I felt for my daughter. It wasn't just defiance, it was survival. I packed my little car with essentials and drove through the night, every mile a step toward a future where Lily and I would never have to beg for someone else's attention or mercy. By dawn, as the first golden rays of sunlight touched the horizon, I had resolved I would carve a life from nothing, shield my daughter from their neglect, and prove that we didn't need them. That drive wasn't just a journey through the city, it was a journey into independence, and nothing would stop me from claiming it. Starting over wasn't glamorous. I rented a small, dimly lit apartment above a bakery, where the smell of fresh bread mixed with the faint scent of mildew in the stairwell. I had a job at a small marketing firm, barely enough to cover rent, yet it was freedom, a foothold I could build on. Every night after Lily fell asleep, I sat at the little wooden desk by the window, locket in hand, mapping out ideas, reading business blogs, and teaching myself how to navigate the world I had been excluded from. My fingers were raw from typing, my eyes stung from staring at the screen, but every ache reminded me I was doing it for her. It was then that I met Margaret, a seasoned consultant in her 50s who saw potential when no one else did. She had the kind of confidence I envied and the patience of someone who had watched countless hopefuls falter. "Sarah," she said the first day, peering over her glasses, "you have fire. But fire without direction burns out fast. Let me help you channel it." That mentorship became a lifeline. She guided me through business plans, connected me with clients, and reminded me that intelligence and determination could outweigh connections or wealth. The first months were brutal. I worked 12-hour days, juggling Lily's needs, office work, and freelance projects I barely understood. I cried over mistakes and celebrated tiny victories, an email landing a new client, a well-received presentation, a small profit margin that signaled we were moving forward. I learned to wear my exhaustion quietly, tucking it behind smiles and efficiency. I refused to let anyone see me falter, especially my parents. I watched as opportunities slowly aligned. The first big client, a boutique retailer, agreed to a long-term contract because of my persistence and strategic thinking. Then came another and another. With each success, I transferred knowledge into systems, building something I could someday call my own. I celebrated in silence, sharing modest smiles with Lily, knowing full well that my parents believed we were scraping by, living paycheck to paycheck. Yet, even as I found financial footing, there were days when I doubted myself. Could I maintain this momentum alone? Would my past mistakes ever come back to haunt us? I held the locket tightly in moments of doubt, whispering the mantra my grandmother had instilled in me: "You have the strength to move mountains." Eventually, the small victories compounded into something bigger. I founded my own boutique consulting firm. Our first office was modest, yes, but it symbolized something monumental: the transition from dependence to independence, from fear to authority. I was no longer the desperate daughter asking for help. I was a woman building a legacy, protecting her child, and reclaiming every ounce of dignity my parents had once denied us. And all the while, they remained oblivious, assuming I was still struggling, still under their control. The day they arrived, I was calm, eerily calm. My office had grown into a reflection of everything I had fought for: polished mahogany desks, abstract art that whispered sophistication, and floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city skyline. Every detail was intentional, every object a subtle declaration of my journey. The gold locket rested on my desk, gleaming under the soft overhead light, a quiet reminder of the strength that had brought me here. My parents walked in, their expressions a mix of expectation and condescension. They had assumed they would find me frazzled, dependent, still the girl who begged for their attention while they spent lavishly on weddings and social galas. My heart beat steadily, but there was no fear, only anticipation. "Sarah," my mother began, her voice tentative now, stripped of the practiced authority she once wielded so effortlessly. We didn't expect you to be." I held up a hand. "Please, don't finish that thought. Let me show you something first." I gestured toward the expansive office. "This is mine. Every decision, every client, every success, my work. Not your charity, not your oversight. Mine." Their jaws dropped. My father's face went pale, eyes darting around as if the walls themselves were accusing him. I could see the recognition dawning slowly. This wasn't just a modest achievement. This was a fortress I had built from nothing. I walked them through the numbers, highlighting key contracts, my firm's revenue, and the portfolio I had painstakingly assembled. "We're talking millions now," I said casually, almost laughing at the irony. "Remember that $250,000 you spent on a wedding? My daughter's life was worth far more than that, yet no one thought it deserved the same urgency." Silence fell. My mother's hands shook, clutching her purse, her face tight with shame. My father, usually so quick with excuses, stammered and glanced at the floor. The weight of their neglect pressed visibly upon them. Then I stopped, letting the moment stretch. I wanted them to feel it, not humiliation for its own sake, but the gravity of their choices. I had become their living verdict, proof that they could no longer dictate outcomes or wield influence over our lives. Finally, I spoke again. "I did this for Lily, not for you. But now, if you want to be part of her life, you need to understand that things have changed." I am not the little girl you could dismiss. I am her mother, her protector, and her advocate. And that is non-negotiable. Their eyes were wide, glistening with disbelief and, perhaps, regret. For the first time, I realized I had shifted the balance of power. No longer could they hold authority over me. Every choice I had made, every hardship endured, had led to this moment, proof that neglect does not define a child's future, and that resilience, when nurtured, becomes unstoppable. I glanced at Lily, playing quietly in the corner, blissfully unaware of the storm that had preceded her safety. My parents' gaze followed mine, and in that quiet, charged space, the truth landed heavily. The little girl they once ignored had grown into the woman they had underestimated, and there was no turning back. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands over the locket that had been my talisman through every sleepless night, every setback. For the first time, I had the power, not just over my life, but over theirs. My parents had assumed I would beg, plead, or, worse, forgive without consequence. I allowed a small, controlled smile to curve my lips. Compassion didn't mean weakness. Firmness didn't mean cruelty. Here's the truth. I began, my voice steady, almost melodic in its precision. I can help you be part of Lily's life. But it will not be on your terms. There are conditions. Rules for behavior, responsibility, and growth that must be honored if you want any place here. My mother flinched. My father swallowed hard. I pressed on. First, no more extravagance at the expense of what matters. Money spent on appearances will now be measured against tangible value, time, care, and love. You will take part in Lily's medical checkups, appointments, and well-being. No exceptions. If you cannot commit to this, you will not be involved. I paused, letting it sink in. The weight of accountability was foreign to them, and I could see it unsettled their carefully polished confidence. Second, I continued, I expect honesty. No more secrets, no more lies. If you have something to say, you say it clearly. No manipulations, no guilt trips. Lily's life, and mine, does not need your theatrics anymore. Finally, I set the most personal condition. Third, you will each take one step toward growth. Mother, you will pursue that art class you always postponed. Father, you will volunteer at the hospital, someplace that reminds you life is fragile and valuable. You will do these things not for me, not for appearances, but to reconnect with what truly matters and learn humility. They looked at each other, shocked, muttering apologies that I did not immediately accept. I waited. Silence. Then I added softly but firmly, I care about you both, but I care about Lily first. If you cannot meet these expectations, you will not see her. I am done giving chances where responsibility is absent. I could feel the subtle shift in the room, the tremor in the balance of authority. For the first time, I wasn't pleading or defending. I was directing, guiding, setting terms. Power wasn't just about wealth or success. It was about control over my own life and my daughter's future. And now I held it fully. I looked at them one last time, a mixture of compassion and strength in my eyes. You have one choice, I said. Grow or step aside. The life you neglected once will not be sidelined again. In that moment, I realized how far I had come, from a desperate young mother to a woman who commanded her world, who could define the terms of her own life and the lives of those she loved. I had become the living proof that neglect did not break us, it refined us. Weeks passed, and slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, my parents began to change. My mother enrolled in her long-postponed art classes, bringing home sketches that reflected a newfound patience and humility. My father volunteered at the Children's Hospital, kneeling beside patients and holding their hands with a care I had never witnessed from him before. They weren't perfect, and there were still moments of doubt, but for the first time, they were learning to value life over appearances, substance over show. Lily noticed the difference, too. She laughed a little more freely at family dinners, asked my parents questions about their classes and volunteer work, and even offered gentle encouragement when they stumbled. Her innocence became a mirror, reflecting the change I had demanded and the growth I had hoped to inspire. I watched them with quiet pride, seeing how resilience and accountability could reshape not only one life, but many. I often sat at my desk, the golden locket resting against my palm, and marveled at the journey. From a desperate mother begging for her daughter's life to the woman who commanded her world with clarity and authority, every sleepless night, every sacrifice, had been worth it. I realized that strength was not only surviving hardship, it was transforming it into something enduring and beautiful. Sometimes, I caught my reflection in the glass windows of my office, composed, confident, unapologetically strong. But the reflection also carried softness, the warmth of a woman who had loved fiercely, who had fought relentlessly for her child, and who had learned to forgive without surrendering her power. And in those quiet moments, I whispered a final homage to the guiding voice that had carried me here. "You have the strength to move mountains," my grandmother had said, and indeed I had. Mountains of doubt, neglect, and fear had been shifted by the unwavering force of love and determination. As I watched Lily play by the window, her laughter spilling into the room like sunlight, I knew we were finally free, free from the past, free from dependence, and free to embrace a future we would shape together. I had become her protector, her guide, and the living testament that even when those who should love you falter, the strength within you can turn despair into triumph. I placed the locket around Lily's neck, feeling the warmth against her tiny collarbone, and said softly, "We decide our own worth, sweetheart. And we will never let anyone tell us otherwise." Bottom of form.